Okay, Rabotai, let's begin. We are on Daf Chavtet Amud Bet. If you're following along in the art scroll, it is on 29b4. Okay, we're up to the Itmar. Yeah, everyone's got their place? Something, the Skype just glitched out.
Service was a little...
You're on SOS. You put it on the...
I was on, it dropped on the Wi-Fi.
It dropped on the Wi-Fi?
Here's
Probably needs to be reset, the Wi-Fi. Okay, happened last week also.
Maybe the snow's, I don't know.
Could be.
Is buffing?
It might be, I'm not sure. Maybe
Mine broke out. Oh, it came back.
All right, well, worst case scenario, they'll have the video up afterwards. Okay, we are on Daf Chavtet Amud Bet, 29b4, starting with Itmar. The Gemara says as follows. Itmar, we learned. Rosh Chodesh Tevet. You have it up?
I'm trying to reconnect to the Wi-Fi. Does someone else have Wi-Fi signal?
Anyone else have it?
Open the door, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, let's just try it.
Thank you.
Okay, Rosh Chodesh Tevet, Shechal Lihiyot Bachol. So we described this already. Every time you have Rosh Chodesh Tevet always, without fail, will fall on Chanukah, right? Because Chanukah starts on the 25th day of the month of Kislev. It's 8 days long. There's only 5 days from the 25th till the end of the month, right? So it's always going to fall out, depending on the year, either 5th day, 6th day of Rosh Chodesh, okay? Of Chanukah. So Rosh Chodesh Tevet, Shechal Lihiyot Bechol. So you have now Rosh Chodesh and Chanukah together. Hamar Rabbi Yitzchak said, now we're going to have Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha a bunch of times, so it is reasonable to assume that this is also Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Karu Tlata Berosh Chodesh. What do? Now you're going to read for Rosh Chodesh and Chanukah. But what goes first? And you're going to read 4. How do you read? How do you divide it? The answer is, Al Chachamim tell us, you read Karu Tlate Berosh Chodesh, 3 on Rosh Chodesh from the first Sefer, V'chad, and the 4th reading comes Chanukah. I think you're out again, by the way. I don't know, I guess leave it. Okay? V'chad b'Chanukah, and 1 on Chanukah. So the 4th Oleh to the Torah, he reads the portion of Chanukah on that day. Rav Dimi, the other hand, Rav Dimi argues the Min Haifa. He argues on the opinion of Yitzchak, and he says, Amar, no, Karu Tlata b'Chanukah, we read the first 3 aliyot are on Chanukah, like you would read on a normal day. And then the 4th aliyah, V'chad b'Rosh Chodesh, and the 4th aliyah you read for Rosh Chodesh. Now, it says the Gemara, we have now a machloket between Rav Mani and Rav Dimi and Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. So we don't know how to rule. So what are we going to do? We have to figure out who else. Harry, yours is on. That's what we have to figure out who we're going to rule. Like Amar Rav Mani, Kavatet Rav Yitzchak Nafcha Mistabra. It makes more sense to follow the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha that holds that you read 3 Rosh Chodesh and 1 Chanukah. Why? Bishum, because Tadir, Vishenu Tadir Kodem. There's a general rule in Halakha that anytime you have something that comes up more often and something that comes up less often, what gets precedence? The thing that comes up more often. So therefore, since that's the case, so which comes up more often, Rosh Chodesh or Chanukah? Rosh Chodesh comes more often than Chanukah, so therefore you should do Rosh Chodesh first. And then you're left with the other one. By the way, in this proof of the Gemara, what's the obvious question? Tadir Visheno Tadir tells you what comes first. Who says which Sefer you read 3 from? So the law of Tadir, wasn't it? Isn't it obvious, right?
Yes.
Why is it so obvious? Because listen to the packaging on the tin. What's the actual rule? Tadir Visheno Tadir, something which is common versus or normal, repetitive, versus something which is not as common. Tadir Kodem. So that wouldn't be a proof that you read 3 in Rosh Chodesh. It just proves that you read first.
Three minimum?
No, not 3 verses, 3 olim.
Right.
So how many you would do in each one is not a question here. You would still have to do the minimum of 3 pesukim for each one. Okay. Says Gemara, Amar Rav Avin, Rabbi Avin says, look, I see you and I raise you. Kavated Rav Dimi mistabra. I have a proof that logically we should follow the opinion of Rav Dimi. Why? The Rav Dimi says, what do? We read 3 in Chanukah and 1 in Rosh Chodesh. Asks Rabbi Avin, Mi garam l'revi sheyavo. Every Monday and Thursday, how many people go up to the Sefer? 3. The 4th Aliyah that we have today, why do we have that Aliyah? Because it's Rosh Chodesh. So since it's Rosh Chodesh that brings you the 4th Aliyah, the Aliyah of the 4th should be the reading of Rosh Chodesh. That's a knockout, right? Good one. Hilkach Revi Rosh Chodesh by Mikri. That's the one that you should read for Rosh Chodesh. But since now we have one reasoning favoring one side, one reasoning favoring the other side, at the very least, which comes first? Even if not, which one you read 3 from? The Gemara asks, "My Havi Allah, what should we do now with this machloket?" The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yossi Amar. Rabbi Yossi says, "En mashkichim Rosh Chodesh." We don't pay attention to Rosh Chodesh. Now that's a very strange language. En mashkichim Rosh Chodesh. You want to tell me that there's a law that you read from Chanukah? You read Chanukah. Why do you gotta phrase it like that for? Look at Rashi for a second. The last Rashi, En mashgichin. We don't pay attention. Rashi says, La'asot ikar, to make it the main reading, i.e. the one that gets the 3 aliyot from, to be read from it. So the first opinion, Rabbi Yosef says, En mashkichim b'Rosh Chodesh, meaning the reading that has 3 aliyot is Chanukah. Which opinion is that? That's the second opinion, which is the opinion of Rav Dimi. Rabba Aman, Rabba says, no, En mashkichin b'Chanukah. We don't pay attention to Chanukah, the opposite. We read 3 of Rosh Chodesh. And then after that comes Chanukah because it is not the Ikar. Now, the Gemara ends off and says, okay, so now you had a question. You brought a proof to each side. You asked, what should we do with the halakha? And then you brought me 2 more machlokets, 2 more opinions that each split down the line. We're nowhere. Answers the Gemara, v'hilchita, and in the end, we rule, in mashkichim b'Chanukah, v'Rosh Chodesh Ikar. We do not pay attention to Chanukah, but rather Rosh Chodesh is Ikar. Rosh Chodesh, which means that the first 3 aliyot are Rosh Chodesh, the 4th aliyah is Chanukah. We take our 2 sefarim on the weekday and we read the first 3 aliyot Rosh Chodesh, second sefer we read from Chanukah. Now, no, not because of Tadir. We're reading the first 3 Rosh Chodesh. Oh, you want to know if the logical reason? We don't know. We just had it. That was being brought as a proof. Okay. Now, it could be that it was more of a batra, which means that it was a later opinion that followed it. So lezel batra, which is what we normally would use as one of the ways of adjudicating halakha. But either way, the Gemara tells you that they all agreed in the end that this is the halakha. Now, up until now, we've been discussing the lichatechila case, which means I have 2 sefarim out. I'm just not sure which one do I read from first, which one do I read 3 from, which one do I read 1 from. But the Chachamim also add to that. What happens if you read all 4 from Rosh Chodesh? What would be the halakha? Would you have to read Chanukah as well?
No.
Sorry?
No.
It would depend. What does it depend on?
The day?
No. This is unbelievable.
If it was the right Torah.
Sorry?
If it was the right
Very
Torah.
good. So let's say I pulled out 1 Torah. I'm going to read, let's say I only have 1 Torah. I'm going to read the first 3 aliyot, Rosh Chodesh, then I'm going to roll to Chanukah and I'm going to read Chanukah. That's what I should do. What happens if by mistake I called up 4, I forgot, I read 4 Rosh Chodesh? Halakha is, I don't read Chanukah.
But what does that have to do with the Torah?
Oh, we'll get there in a second. Why am I telling you that? Where did we find that? Nobody said that. The answer is, that's why the Gemara used the language, we don't pay attention to Chanukah. So the Gemara is already saying to you, not only in the case that we're dealing, I want you to understand what will happen in that case. In other words, we're not going to pay attention to the fact that it's Chanukah. Yeah. Now, what happens? I pulled out 2 sefarim. Now you have to read Chanukah, even according to the halakha. Why?
Even if you read 4 under Rosh
Kvod
Chodesh.
HaTorah?
Excellent. So maybe not mashgichim b'Chanukah, but you can't not be mashgiach the fact that you pulled a Torah out you didn't read from. We're very strict with that. Let's say you took out a Torah, it's at the end of Devarim, and you need to read Bereshit. You got to roll it. Why? You have 19 Sefarim there. You're going to wait 15 minutes now to roll the Sefer from the back to the front? Halacha is yes. Why? Because the people will say, oh, the Gindi Torah, the Towel Torah, the Fahi Torah, it's Pasul. It will cause them to say Lashon Hara about the Sefer, to invalidate it. They'll say that's why they put it back. Okay? So therefore, if I pulled out the second Sefer, I can't say En Mashkichim B'Chanukah and not read from it. So if I read 4, what would I do? I'd read now a 5th on Chanukah.
You read the 5th, okay.
Yeah, okay? Let's continue. The Gemara continues. Itmar. So we've been discussing up until now Shekalim. Now if you remember, if you were here for the last class, we brought a machloket between Rav and Shmuel on what the reading of Shekalim is. Who remembers? Shmuel says Shekalim is Kitisa. Okay? Kitisa. By Kitisa, what do we say? By Kitisa, it says when you count the Jews, pull out the coins. What does Rav say? Rav says no. You know what the parasha of Shekalim is? The reading, same reading of Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because it discusses over there the korbanot of the community. What do you use to buy all the communal korbanot? Matzid shekel. So Rav says, which parasha is Parashat Shekalim? Not the counting, which they then gave the shekel, but the spending of said shekel.
Interesting.
Okay? Some people like to count the money. Some people like to spend it. So I think that's a good way to remember. Shmuel likes the shekel, shin. Rav likes the, I don't know how it is, the rahet. The money goes, okay?
The rationing.
Okay, yes, the rationing. Now, the Gemara over here is going to continue according to the opinion that we've already said is halacha. Which opinion was the halacha? The halacha follows the reading of Shmuel, that Shekalim is the beginning of Parashat Kitisa. Says the Gemara, Itmar, we learned, let's say Parashat Shekalim falls out on the Shabbat Tetzaveh. Now, just so you remember your parashiot, what do we have? Tiruma, Tetzaveh, Kitisa. So if you're reading Tetzaveh, front to back, what happens as soon as you finish the end of Tetzaveh? Where's Kitisa's reading? Literally the next word. So the Gemara asks, what happens if it falls Shekalim out on Atat Tetzaveh? Amar Yitzchak Nafcha, Yitzchak Nafcha says, Karushita me'ata ve'atat Tetzaveh. You read the first 6 aliyot from Ve'atat Tetzaveh, ad Kitisa until the end of the parasha, and then Bechad, and then the 7th aliyah is Kitisa ad Ve'asita, until Ve'asita. Normally, what do we do when we're reading a maftir like that? We'll read 7 from the parasha, and then the maftir, which will be the 8th one, right? That's going to be the extra reading. Okay? So here he's saying you read 6 from the parasha, and the 7th will be kitisa. Amar Abaye. Abaye said to Rabbi Yitzchak, if that's how you plan on reading Parashat Shekalim on the week that it falls out on Tat Tetzaveh, Amri, the people are going to say, they're following along in the Chumash. They don't have it divided in art scroll. You know, they just have the Chamishei Torah. Ukumehu the Kamuk Me'atam. They're going to think that what you read was V'atat Tetzaveh. Because since it's the very next pasuk, they're just going to think that V'atat Tetzaveh stretches until the end. Meanwhile, the whole point of reading Shekalim is that people recognize that you read an extra portion. Since it follows directly in order in a scenario where Shekalim falls out on Parashat Tetzaveh, therefore, what are you going to do? Abaye says, Elam Abaye, no. Karu shita me've'atat tetzaveh ad ve'asita. You read the first part, the di regur, the regular olim, goes all the way until the end of Parashat Shekalim. The end of that beginning, so to speak. The first chapter of Kitisa. And then, what do? Tani v'kari v'kitisad v'asita. you read that portion again.
Oh, wow.
And what that does is everyone's all of a sudden looking up, they want to know, why'd you read it a second time? That becomes the ideator, so now you know that this was an extra reading. Is that interesting?
Yeah.
Now, what does Abaye hold on a non-Parshat Tetzaveh week? Of course he holds that you would read, just like Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha said, 6 from the parasha, and the 7th one would be the Aliyat Maftir, so to speak, would be the additional reading. So he would agree with Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha on a regular Shabbat, but when it falls out on Parshat Tetzaveh, he holds that you have to do it a double reading of Shekalim in order to be able to make it stand out. Metveh, the Gemara asks, Chal liot b'parasha smucha la, if kitisa, if Shekalim falls out on the parasha which is right next to it, okay? I.e., Tetzaveh. Ben milefanea, i.e. Tetzaveh, ben milachareh, or if the parasha that you choose is the parasha following Kitisa, which is Parashat Vayakel. Okay? Korin ota, what do? V'choflin ota. They read Parashat Shekalim, and then they read it again. Now, why do they read it again? What's the point of reading it again? The point of reading it again is that the people should not assume that that's connected, and that the reason why you read that is because that's its parasha. The Gemara says, "Bishlema la Abaya nicha." According to the opinion of Abaya, that you repeat it, the end, we understand what this Braita is telling us. However, according to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, we don't understand. Why? Since you're only reading Parashat Shekalim once that week, incorporated in the continual reading from Ve'atat Tetzaveh. So, what is the Braita talking about? Repeating it, according to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says, okay, you're asking me a question from the beginning of the Braita, which says that milifanea, when Ve'atat Tetzaveh falls out before, you're going to read it and double it. You're asking a question on me. Ula Abaya minicha. Do you think the Braita fits according to Abaya? Tenach lefanea, when it falls out the week before ai Tetzaveh, that makes sense. Le'acharea hechi mishkachat la. But when it falls out afterwards, how would that work? Doesn't make any sense.
You go back instead of reading the first portion only.
Read the old Shekalim and then
Yeah, but you would never get to Shekalim. If you're reading Vayakel, so you go from Vayakel all the way to the end of Vayakel. What comes at the end of Vayakel? Pekudeh, not Kitisa. So it doesn't make sense. There's no reading and rereading because you don't even read it one time. What are you going to have to answer for Abaye to answer the problem on him? Kofla b'Shabbatot. What it means is, it doesn't mean that you repeat the parasha of Shekalim 2 times on the Shabbat. Choflinota means you read it this week and you read it next week. In order that the people shouldn't make a mistake because of proximity, so what will we do? We're going to have 2 parashat Shekalims. This week Shekalim, next week Shekalim. And the way it will stand out is by having 2 weeks in a row that you're going to read Parashat Shekalim. So that's what you're going to have to answer according to Abaye. And since you're going to have to answer that according to Abaye, you may as well answer the same answer for me too, that Koflin Ota does not mean that you read it 2 times in a row. Okay? Because even if it did, and it made sense, according to Abaye, for when it falls out on the week before it, i.e. Tetzaveh, it still does not make sense when it falls out on the week after it, i.e. Vayakel. So therefore, my answer, my supposition in the Braita works for me just as well as it works for him. Okay? The Gemara continues. What about Chal liot b'kitisa atzma? What if Parashat Shekalim falls out not the week before, not the week after, but on its own actual week? What do you do then? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Yitzchak Nafcha is on steroids. Had his Wheaties on Parashat Shekalim, I guess. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, he says, Karu shita min v'asita ad vayakel. You read 6 olim from v'asita until vayakel to the end of the parasha. V'chad kari mikitisa v'arasita. and then one person reads shekalim. So what did Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha just do?
He went backwards.
He went backwards.
And then you go back.
You're starting like at Sheni, because where is shekalim? The beginning of Kitisa. You're starting after that, reading through the parasha, and then you're going back to the beginning, and the last guy is going to read shekalim. That's Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha's answer, and that's how you'll know that it stands out. Because if you read it regular, that's the week of that's this week's parasha. So what are you going to do instead? Read it from there until the end, and then read the beginning again. Abaye says, what are you talking about? Matkif la Abaye. Abaye asks, Hashta Amri lemafreu dekari. According to what you're saying, the people are going to look at you and say the guys read it backwards. They're not going to think that it's Parashat Shekalim. They're going to think that you're dyslexic and you don't know how to read straight. You read it backwards. You read the last part first and the first part last. Okay? And now the guy's going back and he's reading it again. Gemara says, so what should you do instead? Abaye says, Karushita advayakil. You read 6 from the beginning until the end. And then you read that beginning of Kitisa a second time, and that way everybody knows that it's Parashat Shekalim. The Gemara says, Tanya Kavate de Abaye will learn a bright according to the opinion of Abaye that told us just now how to read it on Parashat Kitisa. If it fell on Kitisa itself, Korinota v'choflinota. You read it and then you repeat it. Okay? Now, let's just be clear.
Wow.
Let's just be clear, right? We still have a problem. What's our problem?
You're going backwards.
We have 2 braitas. No, you're not going backwards. Because you read it already. According to Abaye, he started in the beginning, finished the whole parasha, then read the beginning again, which by the way, if you had to guess what you should do, any one of us would have guessed that.
Yeah.
I still don't know why Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha wants to do what he's doing. Start and Sheni, finish, go back. Why would we do that?
He doesn't want to repeat it.
I understand you don't want to repeat it. But why is repeating it such a problem that he's willing to come up with this weird scenario where you're skipping and going out of order?
It's not if you're repeating it, it's not as
Not as important.
kavod, yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer to this question yet. I don't understand why Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is so bothered by this idea that he's willing to, bend himself into a pretzel, to go backwards. All right?
Yeah, like if you say they read the saying here on the bottom, like the current post-Talmudic era. The
Where are you?
Maftir repeats a passage, number 2, towards the bottom.
Number 2, yeah.
The Maftir repeats a passage that's already been read, and then they read the Maftir.
Okay. So what?
So it's like the Maftir is the card of that aliyah, really, the haftarah that they're reading.
What do you lose by actually reading this parasha like a normal person?
It's losing
Nothing.
it. He's trying to highlight it for shekalim.
It's going to be highlighted because you did it again.
Yeah, but people are gonna maybe disregard it because you already read it. Not disregard it, but not.
People are not going to notice it if you read it straight. People will notice it if you read it a second time. If you read it the other way, you read it out of order. So you gained that it was unique, but you lost that you're not reading the Torah like a normal person.
And then you.
Which is what Abaye's question
then you would
is.
just skip Sheni, and then just start the next.
No.
parasha
Read like you would
next
normally
week.
read. Read like you would normally read. 6 olim. The last ole, 7, what does he do?
Goes
back to
to
Kitisa. What's wrong with that? Why is Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha coming up with this highly irregular suggestion that Abaye then immediately attacked, which again, any one of us would have asked the same question, all right? So I don't know what bothers him so much about this idea of koflinota. I understand in a scenario where you don't have to do it, that you don't want to do it. But if you have to do it, what's the problem? Anyway.
Well, maybe he's saying people will realize we're reading out of sequence because of a special reason. To give shekalim more, kavod at the end.
But you still read the Torah out of sequence. That's not a good thing. Like,
I don't know, we're trying to interpret what the guy's thinking.
we read Megillah, right? No, we are trying to, but I want to do that in a way where what we come up with, we're happy with.
Okay.
So, I don't have an answer.
Okay.
Perfect is the enemy of good.
Get back to us.
Yes, Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so, but that's not even my question. My question is, if you remember, only a couple lines ago, we had a problem with the word koflin ota. Who do we have a problem with? First, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Then Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is like, shine the light on me, with a question mark, shine the light on him. You're asking me a question of koflin ota, right? It says, when Parashat Tetzaveh, I hold, you read all the way, and then you read Tetzaveh at the end. Abaye said, you read it twice, okay? However, you read Tetzaveh straight through Shekalim, and then you read Shekalim again. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha said you read it six olim in the whole parasha, and then you read one time Kitisa. The Gemara asks, the Braita says, Koflinota. Right? So it fits according to Abaye. Doesn't fit according to you, Rabbi Yitzchak. What does Rabbi Yitzchak answer to that? Rabbi Yitzchak says it's the same problem for Abaye. Because the Braita says that you do this when the week before and the week after, right? Before and after, Choflinota. So ask Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, when you're reading Parashat Vayakel, where would you double the reading of Kitisa? It's neither here nor there.
It's not doubling.
What does Rabbi Yitzchak have to answer to that? What's Abaye going to have to answer to that? No. Koflin ota in the Braita, that's not what it means. What does it mean? Sorry?
Oh, no. He wants to close it.
Oh. What does Koflin ota mean? Koflin ota means in the Braita that we read it the next Shabbat. Remember we just answered that? So we just dealt with the Braita, and we said about the words of the Braita, Koflin ota. How do we translate them?
Doubling it, but over the weeks.
Over 2 weeks. Now Abaye all of a sudden finds another Braita. Well, shock, horror. What words does it use? Koflin ota. You're like, proof to Abaye. Yeah, but we just discounted those words from the other Braita. So how is this Braita a proof after Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha's attack that says, if you learn Koflin ota Abaye that way, I have another Braita that's a question on you. Sometimes you read the Gemara, and if you're being like intellectually rigorous and honest, you like, what's the Gemara talking about?
It's wild.
Okay? Let's see. So the Braita says, Tanya kavate da Abaye, we brought the proof according to Abaye, Korinota v'choflinota. You read it and you repeat it. All right? Says the Gemara, it says in Mishnah, Chal liyot b'toch HaShabbat. If it fell out on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat, Magdimin LaShabbat she'avra. So what do? We don't read Shabbat. We don't read Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh and Shekalim. Shekalim moves right to the Shabbat before. Okay. Now let's go and try and understand what does that mean. Itmar Rosh Chodesh Adar shechal liyot be'erev Shabbat. If Rosh Chodesh Adar fell not on Shabbat but on Erev Shabbat, on Friday. Okay, the Mishnah talked about if Rosh Chodesh Adar fell during the week. So one more time, let's just be absolutely clear. I want to make sure that I wasn't saying it incorrectly. Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out in the middle of the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day, any day during the week. We read Shekalim before that. Why? You remember?
You don't have a triple.
No. Sorry, that's why I was worried that it would sound like that's what I meant. I did not mean that. Megilla. If Rosh Chodesh Adar is on Tuesday, you don't read Shekalim the Friday after, or Rosh Chodesh is Thursday. You read it before. Why do you read it before? If you remember, because when did they start the collection of the Shekalim? On Rosh Chodesh Adar. If Rosh Chodesh is on Tuesday and you're reading Parashat Shekalim on Friday, you're losing those days. So there was already a hayub to give the Shekalim, and the people don't even know about it. Okay? So therefore, what do? We go back Shekalim to the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh Adar. Itma Rosh Chodesh Adar shechal liyot be'erev Shabbat. What happens if it falls on Friday? So when do you read it? You read it a whole week before? Rav says, Magdimin, we go back to Shabbat, the before. The same way, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you do that, also Friday you do that. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Me'acharin, it's close enough to Shabbat that we're not going to make you go back a whole week for Friday. Gemara says, okay, what's the logic here? Rav Amar Magdimin Rav says, Timken Batziluhu Yome Shulchanot. They're going to lose out, right? The days where the people were coming to change all the money for everybody to bring shikalim, because there'll be at least one day that people don't know about it. Shmuel says Ma'achrin. Why? Amar lecha sof sof chamesar b'ma leShabbatei mikla. In the end, the 15th day is going to be on Shabbat. Ushulchanot lo nafki. Therefore, they're not going to go ad chad b'Shabbat until the Sunday. So, if that's the case, if the reason why we're pushing it off is so that they could be on the 15th in Jerusalem, if anyway the 15th, because that's the math will be that it's going to turn out on Shabbat, on Erev Shabbat, if that's the case, so we don't have to be worried about that. So the whole reason for making it early is not there. Gemara says, you're getting a phone call. I think that pauses the thing. I think that pauses the Skype.
Just press ignore.
Okay, I'm not ignoring your calls on your behalf. I don't know. Maybe it's okay. Says the Gemara. Beautiful. That was a as important lesson as the entire Gemara class. Was that line right there, Morris? V'shulchanot lo nafki chad b'Shabbat. Therefore, hilkach me'acharin. Therefore, we're not worried about making it earlier, because we'd rather have shkalim and zachor connected, one close to the other. In other words, what's the Gemara over here saying? Hilkach me'acharin. It's saying, if it doesn't matter, why wouldn't you do it anyway first? One more time. Right. Shmuel is saying it's not necessary. But just because it's not necessary doesn't mean it's not better to. So why are you saying don't wait? Why are you saying ma'acharin? So Shmuel, the Gemara is throwing in over here, not just lo makdimin, that we don't bring it forward, but ma'acharin. Why?
Because they're not going to be there on...
Because we want shkalim and zachor ideally to be back to back.
Not for the fact that it's Shabbat and they won't be there because the people aren't going to come till the next day?
No, that would be, the logic normally is you have to go backwards. Okay? Shmuel says, here in this scenario, it's not necessary. But let me ask you, even if it's not necessary, why wouldn't you go back? Just because it's better to. Like Rav says, you're not going to miss out even one day. Listen to this. The Gemara has a reason, not just lo makdimin, but the Gemara's word is me'acharin, which means that it's not just that we're not proactively changing it to earlier, it's that we're proactively delaying it to later. Because we want that shikalim and zachor should be together. Why is it important?
There'll be a week space saying...
There'll be a week in between shikalim and zachor. Why do we want shikalim and zachor to be together? Why is that important? I don't know if anyone can remember this. What does Haman say when he goes to the children? He says, tell me your Pesukim. And the children, he says, what have you learned? And the children are saying what they learned. One of the Pesukim, that's one. One is the Komets. Good. I was able to get your charades, Jonah. What's the other one? What's the other opinion? They told him about the Mahatzit shekel. And Haman said, your half a shekel outweighed my 10,000 kikar, 10,000 talents of silver that I gave to Achashverosh. Zachor is the parasha of vanquishing Amalek. Shekalim is the parasha of giving the shekalim. So shekalim to Zachor is literally how the salvation came about on Purim. So we'd much rather have shekalim Zachor be bookends right next to each other. Okay? Gemara continues. Hadush. Gemara continues. Tenan, we learned the Mishnah, Chaliot Doch Shabbat, if it falls out, Rosh Chodesh falls out during that week. Makdimin Shavar, you go back to the week before. Umafsikin Lishabat Acheret. And then you have that one Shabbat, which is an off week between Shekalim and Zachor. Ma'elav Afilu Be'erev Shabbat. The Mishnah says if it falls out during the week. isn't Friday included in during the week? It's a weekday, right? So that would prove that we go according to Rav that any day during the week you go backwards. Gemara says no, betoch Shabbat dafka. It says during the week, like in the middle of the week, not the end of the week. It could say the end of the weekend. It doesn't say that. It says betoch Shabbat. So therefore, you have no proof to say that it's saying like Rav, because I could say it's meduyak also like
You can
Shmuel.
make the same argument for Thursday because it's already the end of the week, more than the other half, the other side of the week.
I would argue that it would be Sunday or Friday. In other words, betoch Shabbat means in the middle of the week. What's not the middle? The bookends. Sunday and Friday, not Thursday. Thursday is in the middle of the week.
Yeah, but then the last bit of that was because it's closer to, or did I just make that up in my head?
Within.
No, the Gemara was just saying, 1 second, why is Rav and Shmuel having this argument? The Mishnah says
Within the week.
Within the week.
Friday.
Within the week is also Friday.
Yeah.
That's the Gemara's question. The Gemara answers that Shmuel will tell you, no, it could have said, right, any day which is not Shabbat, bechol, a weekday. It says betocha Shabbat, which means that when it's during the week. Friday is not the middle of the week, it's the end of the week. It's the weekend. So therefore, Shmuel is not saying you have to read it like me. He's just saying it's not definitively not like me. In the law, we always have this idea that a person's innocent until proven guilty. But that concept is also true, not just when it comes to guilt. If you want to say I'm obligated, you can't have ambiguous language which could be this way or could be that way. It has to be definitively so, right? And if it's not definitively so, what will I say? I'll read it the way I want to read it. And the burden of proof is on you to then come after me and sue me and take my money. It's the same logic as innocent until proven guilty, which is the same logic as we've discussed Talmudically as the halakha of muhzak, which means that you can't take away from someone who has a chazakah, someone who already is established as in owning something. Okay, says the Gemara. So right now we have a machloket still, all right? Tashma, let's learn the Braita. The Braita says as follows: Ezuhi Shabbat Rishona. What is the first week of the Arba Parashiot? Kol shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar liot betocha. Anytime you have Rosh Chodesh falling out in the week, ve'afilu be'erev Shabbat, and even if it falls on erev Shabbat, so you see that the Braita is saying explicitly, right?
It's removing the reason.
It's removing the doubt of whether or not Friday is included in during the week. And by the way, can I just add, from the fact that the Braita says ve'afil be'erev Shabbat, actually proves that Shmuel is right in his assumption, but wrong in his ruling.
They need to say it just so you.
In other words, that in the reading of the Mishnah, he was right. How do you know he was right? Because the Braita felt it necessary to say not just during the week, but during the week ve'afil erev Shabbat, telling you that if you just had the Mishnah, that would not disprove Shmuel. So, except the fact that the Braita disagrees with Shmuel. But so in other words, he's right in his assumption, but he would be, according to the Braita, he's wrong in his halacha. Now let's take the Braita according to Rav and Shmuel. Ma'ila afil be'erev Shabbat dumya detocha. When the Braita says, and even on erev Shabbat, doesn't it mean ma tocha magdimin, just like during the week? If it falls out during the week, also af erev Shabbat magdimin. What does it mean when it says that the first Shabbat is the Shabbat of the 4 parashiyot? If Rosh Chodesh falls out during the week, and even erev Shabbat, does it mean to say that, and even erev Shabbat, so also we go back? That would be exactly like what Rav means. And then we have a proof according to Rav. Shmuel says, no, let me read you the Braita another way. What it means to say is ba. So in other words, any Shabbat, we go back. Kol Shabbat. So kol shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar liot betocha. Any Shabbat on which Rosh Chodesh Adar falls. So in other words, not kol shechal, any day of the week that Rosh Chodesh Adar falls. Rather, Kol shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar liot betocha ba. Any time that Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbat, makdimin.
But then what?
Or va'afilu Friday. You see, we automatically read Kol shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar liot betocha, meaning in the middle of the week.
Yeah, but it says betocha. It doesn't say alav. Like it doesn't say on Shabbat. It says within.
So Shmuel is saying betocha means in Shabbat. He's reading betocha as ba.
He's changing. Okay, so he's changing the definition that we used prior.
Correct. Yes. He's saying that the Braita is not did not mean to exclude me. The Braita is telling you if it falls out on Shabbat or on Friday, then what's it called? Then the halakha is that you read it then.
How can they just amend the text?
It's not done when it comes to Mishnayot, but with Beraitot, and especially someone of Shmuel's stature. Remember, if Shmuel wants, he can argue on the Braita. Rav and Shmuel less so, but we already come across this idea. Rav Tanahu Upalig. There are times when the Mishnah argues on Rav, and Rav, the Gemara answers, okay, so what? Rav was right at that crossover period between the Tanaim and the Amoraim.
He was an Amorah.
He was both. So he was living
I thought he
in...
was an Amorah, but he was so holy because he came right after.
It's not really so holy. It's that he's the transitional figure. So he's the bridge between Tana and Amorah. So we look at him as Amorah because everyone after him is an Amorah. Okay? But the Gemara says explicitly numerous times, Rav Tanahu Upalig. Rav is like a Tana and he argues. Shmuel is Rav's contemporary. So it doesn't bother me that Shmuel is amending a Braita. If Shmuel was a much later Acharon, that was backed up against the wall, and then says, that doesn't say Patur, it says Chayav. Like, what are you doing? Here, he's amending the Braita, which was not as exact as the Mishnayot, and he himself could argue on it. So he's telling you that's what it means. That's what the Braita means, okay? Chen, Tana de Shmuel, and now here's the best part. When Shmuel had the Braita in his yeshiva, how did they learn the Braita? With the word ba. So Shmuel's version of the Braita was that. It's not that he said, I disagree, I'm changing it in order to save myself. Rather, that's how they learned it in his yeshiva. Okay? So, when do we have the first Shabbat? The first Shabbat of Rosh Chodesh is when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbat or on Friday. Then you read it the first week. But if it falls out during the week, what do?
Go back.
You go back 1 week before that. Okay?
But then you have the problem of Zachor in between.
You would have the problem of Zachor in between, correct.
To go back.
And the Gemara is okay with that. In other words, that would be the reason to not do it, but there would be, when it falls out on Friday, we leave it before, and we don't go back. We don't pull it back another full week, right? We leave it where it is. When it falls out before Friday, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we would go back to the week before. Okay? Says the Gemara. So how do we read in the end? In the end, Kitanai, the machloket Rav Shmuel is a machloket amongst the Tanaim. Okay, the Tanaim, the earlier, the people that wrote the Mishnah and the Braita, they already had this machloket, the same machloket that we're reading now with Rav and Shmuel. Misargin the Shabbatot, the Gemara, Misargin means you alternate. So like odd, even, there's like a jump skip between them. So Misargin the Shabbatot, we alternate the Shabbatot that we have of the Arba Parashiyot in order to line up Shekalim and Zachor. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. That's how Rabbi Yehuda Nasi learns. Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer en Misargin. We always have Shekalim and Zachor set together, and we do not interpolate a Shabbat in between Shekalim and Zachor. So the first opinion is where we sometimes will move the Shabbat, a Shabbat in between, i.e., when it's any day during the week, including Friday. And the other opinion is, no, we never have a scenario, according to the second opinion, where we have a Shabbat in between those. Now, I'm not really sure what he's talking about, because even Shmuel agrees that if it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're going back. The Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Shimon ben Elazar says, Matai, when did I say that? Shabbat. I said you never dump that in there, that extra week, when it falls out on Friday or on Shabbat. But when it falls out on Shabbat itself, okay, so on Friday and definitely before it, right? That's when we say you don't go back. But when it falls out on Shabbat, when it falls out during the week, right? Thursday and earlier, Magdim v'koreh mishabat she'avra. You go back 1 week. Af al pi she'u Shvat, even though it's in the month of Shvat and it's pulled apart from what's it called, and as well, it doesn't line up for the 15 days, if you remember, of the money changers that they were doing their money changing before they went to Yerushalayim. Still, we go back in order to be able to have the announcement of Shekalim come before the Chiyuv of Shekalim. Okay, we're going to continue from here next week. Sorry, Thursday, right?
It sounded like they were more concerned with
Alamak.
the idea
of